Have you ever received an automated call and wondered how you can set one up for your own business? Vonage's Voice API allows you to do just that. The Voice API makes it very easy to send interactive voice calls to your customers. Today, we'll show you how to program an automated call and play an audio file when answered. We'll be doing this in PHP using Vonage's PHP SDK. To follow along, you'll need a Vonage API account. If you don't have one already, you can sign up today and get your account up and running in minutes. To code this up as simply as possible, we're going to use the Slim framework, which is a PHP micro framework that allows you to quickly spin up APIs. We're going to create two endpoints, one to trigger an outbound call and the other to play the audio when the call is answered. All of the source code and commands mentioned in this video will be linked in the description below, so don't worry about copying everything down. First, make sure you have PHP 8 or greater and Composer running on your machine. Next, let's create a directory that will contain our code, and then use Composer to generate a new project by running composer init. We can skip all interactive questions by hitting return, which will just set up our project with the default settings. We'll then need to pull a few different packages into our project using the composer require command. The first package is for using the Slim framework, and the second is for pulling in the PSR7 interface. PSR7 defines standard PHP interfaces for HTTP requests and responses, which Slim implements. The next package is the Vonage PHP SDK, which allows us to easily interact with Vonage's APIs using very few lines of code. And lastly, there's a php.env package, which makes it easy to pull environment variables from our own .env file, but more on that later. Now that we've included all of our dependencies, let's create our Vonage application. The Vonage PHP SDK requires an application ID and a private key, both of which you get when creating a new application instance on the Vonage dashboard or through Vonage's CLI. For this example, I'll show you how to create an application using the Vonage dashboard. Go to the side menu and click Applications. Then click Create New Application. Here, we'll want to give your application a name and generate a public and private key. The private key will automatically download. Next, under Capabilities, we'll want to toggle on Voice to allow us to use the Voice API. Don't worry about filling out the webhook URL fields yet. We'll come back to that later. Once Voice is on, click Generate New Application. You'll be led to the homepage of your new application, where you can do things like edit the information, as well as quickly access some information like your application ID. For now, let's copy that application ID and add it to the .env file I mentioned. We'll also need to move our downloaded private key to the root of our project, and then add the path to the .env file as well. We have a few other variables we'll add to the file, such as the base URL for this app, the to phone number that our code is going to call, and the from phone number that will be making the call. We'll come back to the base URL after we finish writing our code. You can set the to number to the number we want to receive the call, and the Vonage number to a virtual number you've previously purchased in the Vonage dashboard. If you haven't yet, you can go to Build, Phone Numbers, and then Buy Phone Numbers to do so. Make sure that number complies with any rules that may apply to your country. Now we're ready to write our two endpoints. Create a file called index.php in the source folder in the root of your project. In index.php, after pulling in our autoload.php file and our .env file variables, the next thing we'll want to do is create a new app factory object from the Slim package. This is what allows us to quickly create these two endpoints. The first endpoint we'll create is a get endpoint called /dial. When this is called, it will call a number and play an audio file when the recipient answers. To start, we need to create a Vonage client object using our application ID and private key that we generated. Here, we're getting the private key path and application ID and using them to create a Vonage credentials object, and then the credentials are passed into the client object. We can now create an outbound call object, which just takes a to number and a from number, which in this case is the Vonage virtual number. Now that we created the call, we need to build out the actions that should take place after the call recipient answers. That's where Vonage webhooks come in. When the call is answered, Vonage will send a post request back to us so that we can handle the next steps of the call. So here, we're chaining the set answer webhook to the call and setting its parameter to our second endpoint that we'll start building soon. The endpoint is /webhook/answer. The last thing we need to do is put all these objects to use. In these last couple lines, we're now telling the client to actually make this outbound call and respond with the text outbound call started. So when that get endpoint is called, it will simply make a call and wait for the recipient to answer. When the recipient answers, Vonage will hit our second endpoint, which we'll build now. As mentioned, this endpoint will end in /webhook/answer and will be a post request. Responding to an answered call is easier than you probably imagined thanks to Vonage's easy-to-use library for handling calls. The first thing you'll want to do is create a new Vonage call control object. With it, you can apply a ton of actions to it, but here, let's first have it talk using an automated voice. We can use the talk action to have it say, "Here's some soothing music for you." And then we can use the stream action to play a music file using a public URL. In the last couple of lines, we're turning our NCCO action instructions into JSON and returning that back to Vonage to perform those actions. And at the very end of this index.php file, we can run app run to officially get these endpoints up and running. Though the very last thing we need to set up before we run this is a base URL. So let's go back to that. To run this locally, we can easily get it up and running using the built-in server in PHP. All we need to do is run php-s localhost 8080-t src, and that would allow us to hit our get endpoint. Our post endpoint, though, is a webhook that Vonage calls to let us know when our call has been answered. And for them to do so, the endpoint has to be public. Therefore, we'll want to forward our local URL to a public URL. There's a few different tools that can help you do that, but the most commonly used one is ngrok. Once you get your public URL, add that as your base URL in the .env file. You'll also need to add this URL to your Vonage application. Go back to edit your application and go to the capabilities section. In the enter URL field, enter your complete URL. With everything running, we're now ready to test it out. In the browser, I'm going to go to the base URL /dial, which will send a GET request to our endpoint. We see the text response that we expected. Now let's watch what happens.
Here is some soothing music for you.
As you can see, we successfully received an automated call from Vonage with an interactive call response. In this video, we learned how to play an audio file into a voice call using Vonage's PHP SDK. If you plan to try this on your own, then just remember that all the source code shown in this video is linked in the description below. For more quick tutorials on Vonage's PHP SDK, as well as any of our other APIs and supported programming languages, subscribe to this YouTube channel, join our Slack community, and check out our blog at developer.vonage.com.